But gifts are a big part of Christmas, aren't they? Hopefully you've had a chance to see some already today, but certainly later on the day I'm sure you'll get a chance to open some. Maybe you remember that game as a kid, that game of Pass the Parcel. Do you remember that? Pass the Parcel? Do you remember the anticipation of unwrapping each layer of the gift and hoping to be the one who uncovered the gift at the centre, the big gift? Because, under each layer there's like a Freddo frog or something ridiculous, and you're like, hey, I like chocolate, but I really want the big gift. And every kid wants to be the one that unwraps that last layer. And this story in Matthew chapter 2, it feels a little bit like that as we read through it. As we read through, we feel like we're peeling back the layers. And each layer reveals something intriguing, but it's not yet the heart of the story. And of course, these layers, they're not just colourful wrapping paper. They're deeper than that. They're much more significant than that. And in fact, these layers, and each layer in this story, reflects the kind of questions and the kind of responses that people have around Jesus. And of course, beneath all these layers, as we peel them away, is the true gift of Christmas. And it's a gift that changes everything. It's a gift that's waiting for all of us if we can just be patient enough to get through all the layers above. So I want to play Pass the Parcel with you as we read through this scripture today and unwrap this gift together. And so the first layer of wrapping around the gift in Matthew chapter 2 here is the star, the Christmas star. And so the story opens with the Magi, or you might call them the wise men, the Magi. They're following what seems to be a miraculous moving star. So Matthew writes for us there in the first couple of verses that the Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who's been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." They saw his star and they came to worship him. Now, this is clearly a remarkable star. It wasn't just hanging up there in the night sky like other stars. This is a star that moved, and it acted as a guide to the Magi. And ultimately, it stood over the place where Jesus was. Now, for centuries, scientists and theologians have theorised about what this star might be. Maybe it was an alignment of planets, was it a supernova? And there's all sorts of attempts to try and explain what this star is. But none of those theories have really captured the uniqueness of this event. The bottom line here is that God was at work in the natural world. This was God's divine signal, and he was using the natural world to point to his king, the king. And so the natural world played a key role in the Christmas story. But let's not forget that the natural world is not the point of the story. The star, the miraculous star, is not the point of the story. It's merely the wrapping around the gift. Some people see the natural world, and most people would agree that the natural world is amazing, but some people stop there. They stop there at the natural world and they say, well, this is all there is. There's nothing more. The natural world is all there is. But here in the Christmas story, we see the natural world serving God's purposes. And we see that the natural world reflects God's glory. That's why it's beautiful. That's why it's awe-inspiring. The Bible reminds us in Psalm 19 that the heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. And this is because the natural world is God's world. It's his creation. The natural world reflects God's glory, but it's not the destination. It's not the gift at the centre. It's merely the wrapping around the gift. And this is why the Magi didn't just stop at wondering about the star. They went further. They asked important questions like, what does this star mean? And this led them on a journey towards Jesus. And in this natural event, they saw something supernatural, something that was beyond nature, something that was greater than nature. Now, sometimes we can get stuck at the wrapping of the natural world and not proceed any further. For example, we need to remember that the natural world doesn't operate without God. I think we forget sometimes that the environment is completely dependent on God's power and presence. The Bible reminds us of this in Colossians 1. It says, "In him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together." Or in other words, all of the natural world is held together by God. And the danger in forgetting that the natural world is dependent upon God's power and presence for its operation, if we forget that, it can weaken our faith. I think sometimes living in a city, we can forget that nature is dependent on God, can't we? You know, you go to the supermarket, you buy your eggs, you forget about the chickens, or you buy your butter and you forget about the whole process that's gone through in animal husbandry and milking and getting it to the store and all that sort of stuff. You forget about all that when you live in a city. Well, it's easy to forget about that. I was walking down by the river this week and I was reminded of how precarious our city's water supply is. You know, we have a dam up in the hills, it's only half full, and we're pumping water out of the ocean through 2 desalination plants as fast as we can, so we've just got enough drinking water. That puts our city in a very precarious position. And I was just reminded of how, something as simple as water, we need to be remembering that and praying, "Lord, would you supply the needs of the people of this city?" And we can forget that our natural world is completely dependent upon God. And another danger in stopping here at this level of wrapping, the wrapping of the natural world, is that we can start to believe that that is all there is. The natural world is all there is. But if that's the case, if the natural world and what we see in the natural world, if that's all there is, then it's difficult to explain abstract concepts like morality, consciousness, love, and why humans experience a sense of right and wrong, or why humans long for purpose and meaning, or how do we even appreciate the beauty of the natural world. It's difficult to explain those things if the natural world is all there is. But of course, the Christmas story shows us that underneath the wrapping of the natural world, there's a divine creator. And we all inherently suspect this. We suspect that there's something more to the natural world. And the Bible explains it like this in Romans 1. It says, "Since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and his divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse." What has been made? The natural world. It's clearly seen. God's presence is clearly seen through what has been made, the natural world. And so this star reminds us of that. It reminds us of the natural world. But more importantly, it reminds us that there's something more beneath the wrapping of the natural world. And so we're not supposed to get stuck there, admiring the wrapping of the natural world. Sure, we should let nature inspire us, but we should also let it point us to Jesus, because that's what it's meant to do. The Magi didn't worship the star, they followed the star to Jesus, the Saviour. And today you have the same opportunity. You and I, we have the same opportunity. We have the opportunity to consider the Christmas star, to see the natural world, and to see that nature is not the point. It's not the end of the story. Nature is simply pointing us to the one who can save us. Nature is beautiful, the natural world, but it can't save you. But it does point to the one who can save you. So that's the first layer of wrapping. And the second layer is the Magi themselves. And again, some translations of the Bible call these people the wise men, the Magi, the wise men. So it says there that Magi from the east came from Jerusalem. They asked, "Where is the one born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose, and we've come to worship him. Now, these men were scientists. They were astronomers. They studied the stars. They understood the stars, and they were guided by the stars. They understood them. They represent the scientists of their day. And they represent this wrapping of science. Their journey reminds us that science points us to the Creator, but science is not the end goal. Science is merely the wrapping around the gift. Now, science itself is a wonderful gift. There's no doubt about that. Science enables us to have a greater understanding of God's brilliant creative work in the natural world. And we see this brilliance in the intricate patterns of DNA, or in the vast expanses of the galaxies, or in the complexities of the human brain. We see the brilliance of science and the understanding we can have in that. But we shouldn't forget that science itself is not the end goal. There's a greater gift beneath this if we can just unwrap this layer. Because you see, science is just one kind of knowledge. Bishop J. John puts this brilliantly. He explains that there's actually three kinds of knowledge. He says there's mathematical knowledge, which is a rational, logical kind of knowledge, like 2 + 2 = 4. That's straightforward. There's also scientific knowledge. And scientific knowledge is where we take a hypothesis and then we conduct experiments to try and prove or disprove that hypothesis. Scientific knowledge. But there's also personal knowledge. And personal knowledge comes through experience, like knowing the warmth of love is a personal experience. And he uses the example of a kiss. He says, can you define a kiss mathematically? Not really. Can you define a kiss scientifically? Well, actually, yes, you can. And he gives a scientific definition of a kiss. He says, a kiss is bringing together two sets of lips, and it's the exchange of microbes and carbon dioxide. That's a scientific explanation of a kiss. So imagine you're out to dinner with a date, and you say to your date, shall we bring our lips in close proximity and exchange microbes and carbon dioxide? Yeah. Jodie's up for that. There you go. Now, that's not going to go well, is it? Now, some of you might be thinking, that sounds reasonable to me. Because you're scientists, of course. Now, that's an accurate description, but it's not particularly romantic unless you're someone who's very strange. But the knowledge of a kiss, as we define it scientifically, it's nonsense, isn't it? It's nonsense. But a kiss defined experientially makes complete sense to us. We say, well, when we kissed, I saw stars. Or when I kissed, I got goosebumps. Or it was electric. And we describe it experientially, and it makes sense to us. We use personal experience and the knowledge of personal experience to explain a kiss. It doesn't prove a kiss like a science problem. A kiss is something you experience. And God is like that. You can't reduce God to a scientific equation or experiment. You don't prove God, you experience God. And the Magi understood this. They were men of science, yet they didn't stop at observing the star and studying the star in the natural world. They knew that there was a deeper layer. They knew that there was a greater meaning behind it all. And so perhaps today you've got science-based objections to the Christian faith. Maybe you have doubts about evolution, or the age of the earth, or the probability of miracles. And you know what? That's okay that you have those questions. Totally fine. God's big enough to handle those questions. You should ask those questions. But you're not going to find God there. Because God can't be proven. God is a person. He's not a scientific equation. God is meant to be known and experienced as a person, personally. He's not an experiment. He can't be proven by an experiment. God can only be experienced in relationship. And so to know God, you've got to tear away the wrapping of science. You've got to study science, sure, but you've got to get beneath it and ask, well, what is the meaning behind all this? Science is only the wrapping, and there is a greater gift beneath it. And so this Christmas, I want to encourage you to follow the Magi's example. Let your curiosity and your knowledge lead you to Jesus. Dig further, go deeper, take off the next layer and get beneath it to find the true gift of Christmas. Science can tell you how the stars shine in the sky, but only Jesus can tell you why they shine in the sky. And science can help us explore the intricacies of human biological life, but only Jesus can help you understand why you've been given life on this planet. Why are you even here? Only Jesus can help you understand that. Now, as we keep unwrapping this parcel, this gift, we discover that the next layer is the layer of power. So back in Matthew's account of the Christmas story, we come across this man who had a great deal of political power, and his name's Herod, King Herod. It says there in verse 3, when King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all of Jerusalem with him. Now, for most of us, Christmas is a time to celebrate Jesus' birth. It's a time of joy. It's a time of happiness. It's a time of gathering with family. Good times. But that wasn't Herod's response, was it? It wasn't his response to Jesus. His immediate response to the news of a newborn king was fear. And he's not the only one who's shaken by this news. We're told that the entire city of Jerusalem is disturbed at this news as well. So what's going on here? Well, I'm sure we've all read enough books and watched enough movies to understand why a maniac leader would be threatened by the news of a new king. We get that. But why was the whole of Jerusalem disturbed by this news? Well, I guess one answer is that they'd seen what Herod was capable of. History tells us that Herod went to horrifying lengths to hold on to his power. He murdered his wife, he murdered 3 of his sons, and numerous other family members, all because he saw them as a threat to his power. And even the Roman Emperor, Augustus, had a joke about Herod. He said that it's better to be Herod's pig than his son, because Herod's pig has more chance of living. That's the kind of reputation this guy had. And so when the people of Jerusalem heard that a new king had been born, they knew that their king Herod, they knew him by reputation. If Herod was willing to murder his own family to hold on to power, he could be capable of anything. And of course, with the benefit of hindsight, we know that the people had every right to be afraid, because Herod would go on to slaughter every baby in Bethlehem under the age of 2 in an effort to kill Jesus. So what's the lesson for us in that? Well, the lesson is that when human power is divorced from God's purposes, it becomes dangerous. And we all have power, don't we? Perhaps you're a parent, you certainly have power. If you're in a relationship with someone else, you have influence and power. If you spend money in our community buying services, you have power over those people that you're buying services from. We all have power. If you vote in this country, you have power. But the lesson here is that when human power is disconnected from God's purposes, it becomes dangerous. But an even more challenging question for us would be, what would you do? What would you be willing to do to hold on to power? You see, if we're going to get beneath the wrapping of power, the wrapping of power around this gift, and find the true gift of Christmas, one condition of that is we have to surrender our own power. We have to give up our pride and surrender our power to the King of Kings, to the Lord of Lords, to Jesus. We have to put Jesus in the driver's seat of our lives, and we have to hand him the wheel. And friends, Jesus is very well equipped to run your life. The Bible tells us that Jesus is actually the greatest leader ever born. In Isaiah 9, we're reminded of that. Isaiah 9 says, "For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. And of the greatness of his government and peace, there will be no end." He's a wonderful counselor. He's a good person to have around. He's a wonderful counselor. He gives good advice. He's a mighty God. He's powerful enough to overcome any problem you're facing. He's a mighty God. He's an everlasting Father. He's not going anywhere. He's everlasting. He's constant. He's loyal. He's the Prince of Peace. He's not the Prince of Chaos. He's the Prince of Peace. You want a bit of peace in your life? We've got to give up our power and surrender it to Jesus. Of the greatness of his government and peace, there'll be no end. And so a vital question for us to consider at Christmas is, whose power are you trusting? Are you clinging on, unwilling to surrender the authority of your life to the one on whose shoulders rests all government, all power? Who is on the throne of your heart? Because Herod missed that gift, the gift of Christmas, because he was consumed with preserving his own fragile power. And I want to encourage you today not to make that same mistake. Jesus is the King who rules and brings peace and justice and love. And he wants to bring that benevolent rule to your life, to bring peace, justice and love. And so if you want to get to this true gift of Christmas, the true gift of Jesus, then you have to tear away this wrapping of your own pride and your own power. And you have to hand it over to Jesus to get through to the next, to the true gift of Christmas. Now the final layer of wrapping around this gift. It's just like the others, we have to tear this away as well. Some people get to this layer and they think they've arrived. They think, this is it, I've found the true gift. And this is the layer of religion. It looks like the real deal. But we shouldn't be mistaken. We've got to tear this layer off as well. So let's go back to our reading in Matthew, verses 2, 8 and 16. And we see here that the Magi have come, they've visited Herod, and they say to him that we have come to worship him. We've come to find the King of the Jews, and we've come to worship him. And then Herod says to the Magi, "Bring me word again, that I might go and worship him too." And then later on in verse 16, when Herod realised that he'd been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious, and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem. Now, the Magi were clearly driven by a deep and sincere desire to find King Jesus and to offer him their worship. There was nothing fake or half-hearted about their pursuit of Jesus. But Herod here is a different story, isn't he? He fakes his religious devotion. He says, "Bring me word again so that I might go and worship him." He wasn't going to worship him. We see that in verse 16. He just wanted to know where Jesus was so he could kill him. He was very insincere, completely insincere. He was a hypocrite, a religious hypocrite. He was a phony. And this contrast between the Magi and their devotion to Jesus and Herod and his fake religion, it highlights an important matter for us, and that is that religion doesn't matter. Religion doesn't matter. You can go through all the religious motions, you can say all the right prayers, you can go to church every Sunday, you can sing all the Christmas carols you like, you can give and be generous and still miss the true gift of Christmas. Because religion is just the wrapping. If you want to get to Jesus, you have to rip away the layer of paper that is religion. That's exactly what the Magi did. They dropped everything to go on a long journey and to seek out Jesus to worship him. But on the other hand, Herod, he was a pretender. His heart was closed. He was merely going through the religious motions. He had his own agenda around his religious practice. And so religion is just the wrapping. Going through the motions is not going to get you to the real gift of Jesus. And so when we tear away the wrapping around this gift, the wrappings of nature, the wrapping of science and power, and even the wrapping of religion, what we find at the very centre of Christmas is Jesus, the true gift of Christmas. You know, Oliver referred to one of the most famous verses in the Bible. It tells us exactly that Jesus is the true gift of Christmas. John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, so that whoever believes in him will not perish but have eternal life. Jesus is God's gift to the world. He is the true gift of Christmas. But you know, a gift isn't yours until you receive it. Jesus is God's gift. He's the gift of Christmas. But a gift is not yours until you receive it. Jesus came for you, friends. Jesus left heaven for you. He stepped down into our world and he gave his life for you on the cross so that you could know him. And he's inviting you now, he's inviting you to trust him and to follow him and to experience the life that only he can give.